I think the royal family are probably in one of the most dangerous positions they've been.
Andrew always denied any allegations of wrongdoing, but you very much get the sense in the last few days especially, that dam has burst.
And that's bad for the royals, because if you start scratching the surface of privilege and entitlement.
Are we heading towards the end of the monarchy or vast changes in the monarchy?
Look at this headline, like it's crazy to even wrap your mind around.
It just gets grottier.
It does get grottier, and again, it goes to that idea of trust.
This family is absolutely toxic from the inside.
I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor of The Sun, and joining me this week is the Daily Mirror's Royal Editor and author Russell Myers and news.com.au Royal Correspondent Bronte Coy to discuss all of this and more, including, yes, that photo. You know the one. Right, guys, welcome. Look, this has been a hugely dramatic week, another historic week, and I've got to, before we get into everything that's happened, are you calm?
You are a calming influence, Matt.
Well, are you calm? Because I'm astonished by Prince William this week. This is just a couple of days after the arrest, which we'll get into the arrest and everything that's happened with Andrew. But Prince William was at the BAFTAs and he said, asked about a movie he'd seen, and he said, I need to be in quite a calm state, and I'm not that at the moment. What does this say about the royals, do you think, at the moment? Because look, we're finding this stressful, we're finding this tough. How do you think they are, Bronte?
Well, he was obviously talking about Hamnet, the movie that's been nominated for so many awards, but it's very emotionally distressing. I was quite surprised because even in that context, it is an incredibly telling remark because it's so accurate for what has been happening these last few days. It is astonishing. I know it's been almost a week, but I still can't quite believe we saw those Andrew arrested headlines. I can't believe it's actually come to pass. And surely, especially given the fact that we're hearing the royal family was given no notice either, they're reacting in real time as well. And so that was just a couple of days later, and I think it was just incredibly telling.
We're in a situation here now where the royals are out working, they're trying to keep calm and carry on. We'll get a bit more into this later, but even the King's statement after Andrew was arrested, he said, let me state clearly, the law must take its course. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all, Russell. Is that the right approach, do you think, at the moment?
Yes, it has to be. I mean, they have to be seen to be getting out, as you say, keep calm, carry on. I mean, what else can they do? I mean, the crisis is very much at the palace. I don't think it will serve anyone to put that out into the public space. I mean, there's been a lot of calls about whether the King should make a public address on this. Let's not forget that there has been an arrest, but there are no charges. These are allegations. And there have been allegations, numerous ones, for many, many years. So you can't get any firmer from the King saying, the law must take its course. So let's see what happens. I think that this will be a very long and drawn-out process. I mean, there's an awful lot of investigations ongoing at the moment. So a knee-jerk reaction probably wouldn't serve anyone at the moment.
What's most revealing about this moment isn't just the allegation, it's the tone. The way politicians, commentators, and even traditionally cautious voices now speak about the monarchy marks a psychological shift. The vocabulary has hardened. The euphemisms are gone. For generations, public criticism of the royal family came wrapped in politeness. Today, that politeness is collapsing. And when language changes, power dynamics usually follow. Once people stop cushioning their words, it becomes far easier to justify action. This is an outrage, it's normalization of dissent. The royal family has always benefited from a silent contract with the public. Flaws would be tolerated in exchange for stability. That contract depended on trust. But trust doesn't erode overnight, it thins gradually, scandal by scandal, silence by silence. What we're witnessing now is the end of automatic respect. Respect must be earned, defended, and sometimes rebuilt. The monarchy is no longer judged by its symbolism alone, but by modern ethical standards that don't bend for tradition.
You come on this week, special guest, first time on the show.
Yes,
we're absolutely happy to have you. But also you brought a book out this week. I think it's come out today.
Ooh,
I think
well
we're
done.
very excited about it. This is the intimate inside story, William and Catherine. But in that book, you mentioned that before this crisis started, before the arrest, before these calls cut him out the line of succession, it was William, maybe, that was one of the strongest voices in wanting to cut Andrew off. But what happened?
Well, certainly the crisis before the crisis, maybe. I mean, it's been a long and drawn-out process, this. But certainly, yes, as I say in the book, that after the BBC Newsnight interview that everybody knows about how disastrous that was, it was William who was the loudest voice in the room, saying that Andrew has to be banished from the family. He, both publicly, privately, his association with the royal family would be a stain on the family. And certainly he thought that he should be outside of the picture before the rot set in. That's how it was told to me. And I think that tells you an awful lot about William's state of mind and the fact that he is not only trying to protect the family, but also has one eye on the future. This all affects him and his family. And, 6 years ago, hindsight's a wonderful thing, or perhaps not. And it could have been all so different.
It's amazing his involvement, and you wonder what his involvement is now in coming weeks. Let's speak about last Thursday. So it was very early in the morning. Probably like you guys, we saw the photos emerge, and there was I think it was 8 vehicles drove into Wood Farm, where he's living temporarily. Now I called the palace and said, pretty likewise, and said, what on earth is going on here? I don't think they knew. And it later transpired that even the king and the palace didn't find out about this arrest until it happened.
But this is part of the whole story from here on out, and it goes to the crisis that the royal family is in. They need to be seen, as the king said, this legal process now needs to play out in a way that doesn't look like Andrew is getting any special treatment at all. And in the same way, the royal family not getting that notice. That's part of that. Andrew is being treated as a regular citizen who is under suspicion of wrongdoing. And so it was an incredibly dramatic day because of that. I think that we've seen over the years, bar some major flashpoints, the royal family does have a lot of control over the narrative and then can plan out their responses to things from there. But on Thursday, you did get the sense it was just a completely uncharted waters day. They were completely spinning out of any sort of reality that they'd been used to. And so seeing the King's statement, which came just shortly after the arrest, again, just extraordinary moment when we actually got that news that he had been arrested. And then the King's statement right after that, and then having to get on with the day. And the Queen was out as well. It must have been extraordinary within the palace, wondering how to play that out from there, because I don't believe they did have that notice.
Well, I think I actually quite like the statement, Russell. Quite like it. It said a lot. It said, we are concerned about what's happening with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was saying that we need the law to take its course, but we will carry on, going out and carrying out with our service. We touched on it earlier, but we had quite a lot of royals out on that day, Bronte. We had the King out there.
And the Queen was out, but the service to you all, that was a really important part of that statement as well. I think that really packed the punch right at the end, because that is all they can do now. As you said, this process is going to play out now. It may be a very drawn out one, but the royal family now needs to continue going on and showing that they are fit for purpose, and that there is transparency, and that they're able to represent something for people. And if they're not getting on with their job, then it goes further to the idea of that rot that Andrew had created, and it kind of spreads that poison. But so they need to see that there's stability over here. They're getting on with the job. They're in service to us. It's not just all about Andrew. It's taxpayers are paying for this family. They need to be shown that they're out there and they're earning their keep.
And that's a dangerous recalibration for an institution rooted in history rather than consent. For King Charles III, this moment demanded decisiveness. Ambiguity would have been interpreted as weakness or worse, protectionism. The monarchy cannot afford even the appearance of shielding one of its own when public confidence is already strained. Charles is ruling in an era where optics move faster than policy. The response wasn't about punishment. It was about preserving the credibility of the crown itself. In a media cycle that rewards outrage, hesitation can be fatal. This wasn't leadership by preference, it was leadership by necessity. What sets Prince William apart in this crisis is his positioning.
What struck me in the statement was the very short part of saying, "Let me state clearly." I mean, there has to be a distinction now between the royal family and Andrew. Andrew's a private citizen. He's got himself into this mess. There's discussions about who will pay for his legal fees. Understand that he is responsible for them. But what are his finances like? And so will the king be under pressure to facilitate any sort of legal bill that comes his way? I mean, that will be perhaps further criticism after putting him up. So I think the royal family are in a bit of a bind at the moment, and you're right, these conversations will be carrying on at pace at the palace.
They're in a bit of a bind. We use the word crisis quite a lot.
Yeah, but it is a crisis. You can't don't underestimate what's going on here. There is, it's very, very serious. The allegations are very, very serious. We've only just scratched the surface. I mean, 10 police forces and agencies in the UK looking at this. I'm sure we come on to see it later, but in terms of the government statement about removing him from the line of succession, they've also said that that won't take place until after the police investigation. So you could be looking at this dragging out for many years. And so the royal family need to try and work out a plan of what to say and do at the right times.
And you do get the sense as well, of course, Andrew always denied any allegations of wrongdoing, but you very much get the sense in the last few days especially, that dam has burst, because we're seeing there is action now in so many ways, because we've ripped off the first bit and now, you know, they're going to release the documents related to his appointment as the UK trade envoy. There is conversations about him happening now in Parliament where that would not really have happened about the royal family.
The language being used
is
is so punchy. I mean, Sir Chris Bryant's standing up in Parliament, calling him entitled, privileged. This goes against all convention of previous generations where the royal family would not be criticised. And there are members of Parliament standing up and saying, right, now is the line in the sand. We are going to rip off the Band-Aid and really delve into this. I mean, gosh, God knows what could be unveiled in letters and memos. It could get pretty ugly.
It's exposed the royal family in a way we've never seen before, and the problem is there just doesn't appear to be an endpoint, because, as you say, there are all of these assessments going on. There is now a legal process with Andrew being under investigation on this one charge at least, and the one allegation. And so, yeah, it's that feeling of these things are all, I'm going to use the word, bear with me, but it is unprecedented. The way the royal family is being spoken about in relation to Andrew is unprecedented. And there does feel that there is action going in so many directions, and you just cannot see where this all ends at this point. And that must be unbelievably stressful for the teams at the palace.
Not so calm.
So calm.
There's two things that you mentioned. You know, the MP Chris Bryant. I say there's lots of vitriol coming out, and we haven't seen that kind of stuff openly in Parliament about members of the royal family working or not, or disgraced or arrested or not. We've never ever seen that kind of behaviour. They could have said that before. Let's be honest, you know, this has been going on for 16 years. It feels like there is a massive pile-on at the moment. There's no libel laws in Parliament. They could have weighed in before. And what that brings to me, the fact is that the scariest thing, or probably the most damaging thing for the royal family, is if there's a disappearance of deference.
Absolutely.
If it's now acceptable to speak about Andrew, and then what next? The King, then William. I mean, that for me is what I think would be the biggest fear for them.
Because how do you put that back in? That's out. If that starts, if this is the way we're speaking, and as you say, it was very strong language. If that is happening, and that criticism is something that becomes normalised, well, where does it end? And where does it end? Where do the calls for transparency in different areas, where does that end? And so much of the monarchy exists on the way that there is some mystery around it. It's the majesty of it. And so if this continues, and a lot of I mean, of course, I do believe all due investigations should be unfolding when it comes to any allegations of wrongdoing, and that needs to be looked at. But more broadly, the royal family, where does it all stop in the calls for transparency in any direction?
Because they've got to wait for the police investigation, obviously.
Yes. So you can imagine.
Carry on with engagements.
Yeah.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, keep calm, carry on. I don't think it serves anyone well to open the floodgates of undue criticism. You know, if members of Parliament think there is something to say, whether that's about funding or whether that's Andrew's role as a trade envoy, that is absolutely agreeable. But however, are you going to open the floodgates of just complaining about issues with the royal family? It's a pretty dangerous path.
One where survival depends on distance from inherited controversy. William's approach has been strategic restraint. Fewer statements, fewer appearances, fewer risks. In doing so, he presents himself as the reset candidate the figure Parliament, media, and the public can project their hopes onto once the dust settles.
Generally, I think the royal family are probably in one of the most dangerous positions they've been, maybe since the death of Princess Diana.
Yeah,
I really think there's the impact-wise. We're talking about endpoint. You know, will this ever end? I think Andrew's probably feeling the same. Will this ever end? But line of succession. So this has been muted over the last couple of years. You know, what else can you do to punish Andrew? But the government has said that at the end of the investigation, they will consider legislation to remove Andrew from line of succession, where he's number 8. Is that just politicking?
I thought, it's a bit performative that did it need to be said at this week? It seems as though there are just Neil, well, what can we say next? How can he be punished? I think that the picture on every single newspaper in the world and news site, everybody has seen it, tells you a lot about the situation that the royal family and indeed Andrew finds himself in. There is a calling for Andrew to be punished, until the end of time. But I think we need to have a bit of perspective and say, let the police investigations take their course. There are, as I said, several being assessed at the moment, and it's up to the royal family as well. And these things will take a lot of time, so it's almost giving false hope that it will happen overnight.
I mean, as the representative of Australia, your Prime Minister has come out and said that
it's not like Albanese to get out the blocks very quickly on a royal issue.
Yes, a self-appointed representative of Australia. I think our parliamentarians might have an issue, but that's fine. I'll take this one, guys.
Did you think it was performative from Albanese when you heard it? I mean, was there a clambering for him to make a statement on behalf of the government?
So many people have been asking about the Australian mood in this situation, because obviously we've got the temperature over here in England, and I would say it's very similar. And there is a catastrophe would have to occur for Andrew to ever become king. Obviously, sure. 8th in line, he's not going to become the king. But I can understand that there is also among the public, every time we're hearing a report about it, it is reminded that he's 8th in line to the throne. And just the very principle of that is something that infuriates people. And that is very much the sentiment in Australia, as I think it is here. I think that Anthony Albanese getting involved at that point, why not? Look, he's laid down the cards. Obviously, I don't think anyone thought that there would be opposition to a proposal to remove Andrew from the line of succession. He's made the point that Australia will not stand in the way of that. I don't think it's a surprise. But as you say, is it completely necessary for the conversation to happen right this second, now that the arrest has just happened and there is a legal process that now needs to be followed? I don't know if it is.
I think that's what needs to take precedence.
Yes,
absolutely. Andrew should be removed from the line of succession. There's no way he should be a Councillor of State even though the language had been adapted to say that it would only be working royals. Well, just take him out of the picture. People don't understand this, so they will view inaction as the royal family don't have an appetite to do it. But I think that certainly the police investigation should absolutely take precedent, both for the authorities and for the royal family as well.
I do understand the optics, though, and I completely agree with what you're saying, but it is also the optics right now where it does feel quite chaotic. There are all these stories about Andrew. It now is being collaborated with all these stories from the years past about him making staff members cry, him being a very difficult person to work for. Obviously, these are not criminal allegations, but it more broadly paints a picture of a man who lives a life of entitlement. And I think that is part of the optics of, that scramble of thought of what can we do to prove that we take this so seriously in the line of succession, and the fact he's in line to the throne, however far back he is. I do understand why people are calling for that.
But then that's bad for the royals, because if you start scratching the surface of privilege and entitlement.
Exactly.
And it's difficult because, of course, the King and the Prince of Wales live in palaces and castles. Of course, William and Catherine have moved to Forest Lodge, but that's the perception, isn't it? Fly around in helicopters, have money at your disposal to go to Mustique if you want. But if you start scratching the surface of this, then there'll be more questions to be asked. Well, why don't you get a train? Why do you fly in helicopters? And I do think that's a pretty dangerous situation for the royal family.
It is dangerous, and you're right with that as well, because if you get to the 8th in line, you think, well, he's never going to become king.
Sure.
So why have a 9th? Why have a 10th? Why have 11th? You'll just salami slice large elements of the royal family, and what will be left with.
Exactly.
Now, there was a poll. So apparently, I'm told that support for the monarchy has fallen to 45% after this. Everything that we will move on from Andrew to maybe some lighter stories from the week. But with 45% support for the monarchy, are we heading towards the end of the monarchy or vast changes in the monarchy? What do you think, Bronte? Is a revolution in the air?
It is so hard to tell where this all ends. It is so hard to tell where all this ends. And because of that, it's impossible to say where their popularity lands at the end of all of this process. With that said, it's a critical juncture for the royal family. It is a crisis like I don't think they've ever seen before, as you said. But I think there is a way through it. I don't think it's necessarily the end of the monarchy. I think that people do separate Andrew from the royal family. They see William and Catherine out on engagements and they're not thinking, oh, well, they're all cut from the same cloth. I don't think that people have that perception of the royals. But it is a dangerous time for all the reasons that we've mentioned, which is there is a general perception of the lack of transparency in the royal family and things that were allowed to go on under the roofs of the palaces. And the royal family exists with that trust from people. And if there is any perception that they can't be trusted in terms of, there's these allegations about Andrew's finances when he was out as a trade envoy and charging things to taxpayers. All of this builds up into a narrative that is extremely dangerous. And so when it comes to whether the royal family survives it, I think it is how they continue from this point onwards. But it is very hard to see how it all ends.
That restraint may feel passive, but in royal terms, it's a calculated move to redraw the line between past failures and future legitimacy. Perhaps the most consequential development isn't inside the palace, it's inside Parliament. Once legislators openly debate titles, succession, and royal privilege, the monarchy's immunity weakens. The danger isn't whether laws will change tomorrow. It's that the conversation itself has been unlocked.
I mean, let's make no mistake, this is a hugely serious situation for them to find themselves in. Of course, it won't be the end of the monarchy. I think that they will weather the storm. The king has got out. He's made 2 unprecedented statements in as many weeks. He could not be clearer. Indeed, he said that. The law will take its course. You have William and Catherine are the modern royals, and so they will want to perhaps speak out when the time is right. I think perhaps you could interpret William's statement about being calm how you like. Maybe it was about Hamlet, maybe it was about the situation, maybe he thought that was wise to get that out there. We already heard about how deeply concerned they were. But of course they will weather the storm.
But just briefly, there has been a few news stories this week about Andrew. Bronte, have you seen the stories about him claiming back on taxpayers or billing taxpayers for massages? It just gets grottier.
It does get grottier. And again, it goes to that idea of trust. The public puts an enormous amount of trust in the royal family, and that's why often these questions aren't asked. But then when you go retrospectively and look at this, the fact that he felt that was something that he allegedly felt that was something he could do, charge that sort of thing to the taxpayer. He's not a man that had no money. Even if he did, definitely don't do that. That's not the use of the public purse. But at the same time, it's just that feeling of he's lived a whole life of thinking there was one set of rules for him and a different set for everyone else. And it just paints more of the picture of Andrew that we've been getting, especially in the last few weeks. And it is grotty. Exactly. That's the right word for it.
Grotty. And Andrew's new life, or,
lack of it.
Yeah, he's under house arrest, basically, up in Wood
I
Farm.
see in the papers today about him being stopped riding.
Yeah,
this is possibly the only thing he has. I mean, he's been kicked out of his house. He's got he hasn't got a job. And of course, there's absolutely no public sympathy for him. But to be stopped riding, to be seen out in public, that speaks a lot about how the palace has viewed him, sort of riding around Windsor, waving to people in his car and so forth. I think the lack of introspection about how this has damaged the whole family has been Andrew's undoing as well. So, what next for him? He's only 65. He's
66 now.
He's 66. Yeah, it was his birthday, of course. Yeah. So what is he going to do for his days? And in this case, he's going to go on for a long time, so it'll be interesting to see not only the developments, but what on earth he ends up doing.
But just a quick one. You mentioned there was a raid on his 66th birthday. Do you think that was deliberate from the police, or am I just being a little bit naughty there, thinking he's not had the greatest reputation with police officers and police protection officers and behaving with his flunkies and his staff? Do you think that let's do it on his
There's no love lost, I'm sure, with anybody who has worked with Andrew. This is the constant allegations of his behaviour, bullying behaviours, entitlement, and what have you. I think if you look at what happened to Peter Mandelson this week as well. Cops swooped in, arrested him after there was rumours that he was going to flee. Perhaps something had happened in the last few days where they felt they had to move, and I'm sure that arresting him on his birthday was just an unfortunate occurrence for him and only him.
A coincidence?
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah. Let's speak briefly about Harry and Meghan. I said the other week, we got to the end of the show, because it was all about Andrew. I cannot believe that we have not mentioned Harry and Meghan. Now, they've just gone to Jordan, so they've just flown there, I think, for 2 days. We'll see some lovely pictures and lovely video, and I think it'll be an interesting kind of trip. there's no need for them to get into this debate.
I think that in the same way that the Prince and Princess of Wales did not release a statement after the King's on the day of the arrest, even if Harry and Meghan were here as working royals, if you can imagine that, in 2026, there would be no need for them to release a statement, because this is, as we've said, this is now a very delicate situation as it unfolds legally. The King has made the stance of the palace clear. Harry and Meghan have no ongoing relationship with Andrew that we know of, so there's no reason for them to weigh in. And if they did, it would be, well, it'd be putting their head above the pack and opening themselves up to extra criticism.
Yeah, I think they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, because no doubt, let's say they take part in a broadcast interview with American broadcaster or local broadcaster, any journalist worth their salt is going to ask them, how do you feel about the crisis enveloping your family at the moment? Do you have an opinion on it? If they don't say anything, then they've been silent. If they do say anything, then they're involving themselves in a situation which their own family and the palaces are desperately trying to manage, and have no idea of what is going to happen next. So it's a difficult. I do think it's a difficult situation for them.
But there's no love lost between Harry and Andrew. I don't think they've ever been close.
No.
And I think he's mentioned that in Spare, or he's mentioned that in the past, that they're not exactly, bosom buddies or close pals or anything like that.
All those claims were out there about Andrew, obviously, after the Newsnight interview. And Harry's book came out a couple of years later, but obviously before this latest, with the Epstein files. But even back then, he did write in his book, as you say, he mentioned the sex crimes and the shameful, he used the word shameful, so it's very clear, if he's willing to put that to paper, even back then, that there is no level of closeness between the pair.
Do you think in many ways they're vindicated in getting out? Getting away.
I saw this in a comment piece this week, and it was sort of, Harry has been proved right. This family is absolutely toxic from the inside. Harry had his own reasons for leaving, didn't he? And I think they were formulated many, many years ago, certainly not necessarily in the whole Meghan era. He's always wanted a different path, and certainly I don't think it's anything to do with Andrew. He'd probably be wise to keep his counsel in this sense, especially because there's police investigations as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, this family.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
And we are living in a truly unprecedented time. This is extraordinary. The King having to make a statement after his brother was arrested, ensuring the public that the law will take its course. It's an incredible period.
Someone tweeted me, or X'd me, whatever you call it, after the flurry of storylines over the weekend, or the flurry of stories over the weekend. Someone tweeted me and X'd me and said, I'm bored with this storyline.
Yeah.
It's not a storyline,
no,
but
it's actually happening, yeah.
It feels like it's an HBO production or some kind of, Netflix series. If it was, some of these storylines are absolutely outrageous.
You really cannot have imagined, back when 2020 was unfolding and there was global drama with COVID and all that, but we had Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family, and it felt like the most explosive possible thing to hit the royal family. If you fast forward 6 years, and honestly, look at this headline, it's crazy to even wrap your mind around it. I won't be bored of this storyline for a long time, but again, it's because we have moved into such an unprecedented era, and you never really know where it's going to go.
Everybody's got an opinion on it.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely everybody.
Yeah.
Once that door opens, it rarely closes. Titles become conditional. Roles become reviewable. And the monarchy shifts from sacred institution to constitutional component. That transformation would fundamentally alter how royalty functions in modern Britain. According to William and Catherine, the intimate inside story, Catherine, Princess of Wales, is emerging as more than a supportive presence. She's a strategic one. Her strength lies in understanding emotional perception. She recognizes that public trust isn't rebuilt through declarations, but through consistency, humility, and timing. In moments of crisis, her influence reportedly centers on restraint rather than reaction. In a monarchy struggling with credibility, that emotional discipline may prove just as valuable as political maneuvering. What's rarely discussed is the internal cost of these crises. Royal scandals don't unfold in isolation. They fracture relationships, create camps, and force uncomfortable conversations behind closed doors.
Well, let's bring some light into the proceeding, shall we, Russell? I want to talk about your book.
Thank you.
I'm going to quickly grab it. Yeah, I've got it down here. I've actually got 3 copies.
I know you've got more copies than me.
He carries it around. He just carries it around like that all the
3
time.
of these copies now. I'm going to get one signed in a minute as well, if that's all right.
Very
I'll just keep this down here. Tell us about the book. I mean, I remember you disappeared about 6 months ago, and we didn't hear from you for a couple of weeks, and it turned out that you were pulling this book together. It's a great read. What I like about it is it is a love story. At the end of the day, although they are, the future king and queen, and really see them out on engagements, you detail how they kind of got together at university in the early days and how they worked together. What did you learn most about William and Catherine in your book?
Well, an awful lot. I mean, when I was thinking about writing about, I couldn't believe it had been 10 years since a joint biography had been published. So, that was an angle. But I went into it with an open mind, and I thought that you tell the story of the inside behind the scenes of what had happened and how they'd experienced, these huge flashpoints of the last few years. Not only Catherine and the King's cancer diagnosis, obviously the Andrew situation, Harry and Meghan, but also, the Queen's death and how that had maybe changed their view and their perception, their vision for a modern monarchy. But it really did fall into the category of a love story. So I went right the way back and charted, from the moment that they met and how that changed and shaped both of their lives. And I think that you look into their very, very different upbringings and to who they are as people today, is a really interesting story to tell.
Well, it's called William and Catherine: The Intimate Inside Story, and in the past, there's been a lot of myths that I think have come out about the couple, and one of them was that Catherine and her mother somehow conspired to send her to university to snare the prince. But what I found really interesting, you wrote what actually happened.
Well, that was an underscored by The Crown, which is why so many people think that is the narrative. But certainly, I did want to correct some of the issues if they'd come up. And Catherine had met another teenager when she was on her gap year with Raleigh International in Chile. And she was thinking about changing university. She wasn't necessarily sure if she wanted to go to Edinburgh because a lot of sort of the old public school set were going. And she met another teenager who convinced her to go to St Andrews. And that sort of corrects that narrative of, was she chasing the prince? I'm sure there were certain individuals who did change their course and even change their life plan to follow Prince William to go to St Andrews, but it certainly wasn't Catherine.
Can't blame them for shooting their shot. They gave it a go.
It was really interesting going back into the weeds of the old coverage and back in those times of interviews with young women who had changed their course to try and snare a prince, perhaps. But a really interesting period.
One thing I did like was, Phil, we talk about it, one of the things I liked was the difference in decision-making between William and Catherine, because throughout, and we'll talk about it in a minute, about there's been some dramas, obviously, and there's been rows, with Harry, there's been fights with Harry, etc. But there seemed to be William and Catherine approach things in a different way, which I found surprising.
Yeah, certainly. And what it did surprise me as well is how much of an integral part Catherine is with the institution. I think that a lot of people think, of course, she's one of the most famous people in the world, one of the most photographed, she's glamorous at all stages, whether she's visiting the Scouts or a state banquet. But what came up time and time again of speaking to people who had worked with them for years was how invested she is in the process, how invested she is with the vision of the monarchy. Not even necessarily their vision of becoming a future king and queen, but she is very interested in the future of the foundation. She's very across the strategy. And I think what really surprised me is how much William relies on her. Not just professionally, they work together most days, but also personally and emotionally as well. And there are certain flashpoints you can look to, whether it was their breakup or whether it was issues with dealing with her cancer treatment and diagnosis, that there was a real interesting point of how solid they are as a couple.
The Prince and Princess of Wales are navigating not just public expectations, but private strain. Preparing for future leadership while managing present turmoil requires emotional control that few institutions ever demand of individuals. And history shows that unresolved family tension has a way of resurfacing at the worst possible moments. While the storm brews at home, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle remain physically removed. charting a separate course. Their distance underscores how fragmented the royal narrative has become. To supporters, their absence looks like independence. To critics, avoidance. But either way, it highlights a monarchy no longer speaking with one voice. Parallel royal identities now coexist and sometimes compete for relevance and moral authority. That division weakens the institution's ability to control its own story.